Today, I'm reviewing 5 Elden Ring builds sent in by viewers and rate them on a scale 1 through 10. What's up? I'm Syrobe, and after almost 2 years of dedicating my channel to redefining build metas in Elden Ring, it's finally time to let the viewers cook and give you guys a pedestal to present me your strongest or most creative builds. To be honest, you guys have been leaving your builds in my comment section for a while anyways without me even asking for them. Some are suggestions from genuine supporters of my channel, and others reading more like a schizophrenic manifesto. I wanted to start off 2024 with a brand new content format, so if this video does well, I'll feature more of your viewer builds in the next video. And it's an exciting year for Elden Ring as well, since we hopefully have a DLC release date announcement this February. Surely, right? Speaking of major announcements, I'm currently working with the legendary composer Yuka Kitamura on an original animated sequence. Yes, the Yuka Kitamura, which if you haven't already recognized her by name, is responsible for some of the most iconic soundtracks in Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne, Sekiro, and even Elden Ring. She's massively credited as the composer for all of the boss themes on your screen, and much more. However, I need your help. High quality animations are expensive, so that's where you guys can come in. If everyone who watches this video donated $1, we could easily fund a Kickstarter project for a roughly 3-minute frame-by-frame animation. The animation follows the origin story of the original character I created and his demonic chinchilla companion fighting larger demonic bosses to escape from hell and return to their normal lives. This animation utilizes a thematic composition mainly created by Yuka Kitamura and partially myself. Kitamura is doing all the heavy lifting with her immaculate instrumentals, but I've actually been very hands-on, providing multiple iterations of feedback to help shape the direction of the song to match the animation. So please check out the Kickstarter for a lot more details on this passion project. You can contribute as little as $1 to help fund this project, but there are some incentives like behind-the-scenes access on the animation's progress, an official 30-second preview of the song before anyone else gets to hear it, or featuring your name in the credits of the animation. An animation featuring Kitamura's original composition will be made regardless of the goal being met or not, as I have already largely contributed out of pocket for Kitamura's talent to get the ball rolling and start this project. However, the more money we raise in the Kickstarter, the higher quality the animation will be. For example, if we don't meet the end goal, it'll just be an animation using still images, more like a picture book story. But if we absolutely smash the goal, it'll be a frame-by-frame animation in an action anime style. So please consider donating, because all the money raised will go directly to supporting this project and making it more awesome. And now, here's the metric of how I'll test each build and why. I'm gonna put every single build in this video up against the Fire Giant on base new game. I'll be timing exactly how fast I can defeat the Fire Giant using each build, because you can literally defeat every boss in Elden Ring using anything. So it's just a matter of how fast I can do it. And fun fact, I actually beat the Fire Giant on my first try with every build except the last one. But out of every boss in the game, why the Fire Giant? Well, the Fire Giant is far from the hardest boss in Elden Ring, and I'd argue is actually one of the easiest bosses as long as you have a decent build, which is the key here. All his attacks are very telegraphed and his moveset is limited. He's not very fast and has huge windows of opportunity for you to land free hits on him. However, he does have over 40,000 HP and his few attacks hit like a truck, which is why he's known as a stat check enemy archetype. You might think defeating Malenia would be a better way to test a player's build strength, but in reality, Malenia is the opposite of the Fire Giant and is a direct player skill check instead. Her attacks, namely the Waterfowl Dance, is something that takes a lot more physical practice to avoid dying from, and your success varies greatly depending on the player and less on your build. Malenia does test your build as well, obviously, but she directly tests the player more than the build they used against her. You could have a really good build and stats and still die to her Waterfowl Dance if you don't know how to properly dodge it. But I don't touch grass, so I never have this issue. I will be using every build exactly as they are provided to me, no matter how hard I may or may not disagree with something. And I'll rate each build solely on how I felt it performed against the Fire Giant. And after I give it a rating, I'll make any personal adjustments to their build and refight the Fire Giant again with a more optimized version of the build to see how it compares to the original. And all of this will be set on a timer on your screen. Side note, I am using a third-party program to instantly respawn the fire giant so that when I kill it, I don't have to restart a new save file, as well as give me infinite runes to max out any build, and manual stat value editing to make the build swapping faster. Starting off with the very first viewer build, this is the Black Flame Tornado build and was sent in by the user on your screen. They gave me all their requirements here in this comment, but in the interest of time, please reference this build sheet as it neatly organizes everything they require me to use in this build in one place, and wow, it's a lot, and almost immediately throwing up some red flags, but I said to use the build exactly as they were provided to me. However, this player did not provide the stats to go along with this build, and I assume they're leaving that up to me to figure out for them, so I'll just meet all the minimum requirements for everything in their build to keep it simple. Starting as the Vagabond class, by equipping everything they required me to actually equip, I am overloaded, meaning I can't roll at all until 25 endurance minimum, which is the first soft cap for equipment load. This then allows me to just be a heavy load and casually fat roll instead. Awesome. This build requires a minimum of 49 endurance to finally stop the fat rolling and get a medium load mid-roll. So I went with 60 vigor, as that's pretty much the average amount for any build, and as for all the other skill points, I just used the bare minimum amount to meet all minimum requirements for every single required spell, weapon, or gear requirement, which came out to level 172, just for meeting all the minimum attribute requirements for their build. Yikes. But let's not be too quick to judge, as we still need to get an actual test against the fire giant. This build comes with a lot of buffs that the viewer wanted me to use to perhaps increase the damage of my Black Flame Tornado, but it doesn't actually work that way, though I give them an A for effort because in theory they would be correct. After prepping all of the required buffs, the last ones to use are the Jellyfish Shield and the Ash of War on the Winged Greathorn. However, you can't use the Black Flame Tornado Ash of War while you have the Jellyfish Shield in your offhand. The moment you swap off the Jellyfish Shield, or even if you two-hand the glaive to keep the shield on your back, you instantly lose the damage buff it gives you. I'm also supposed to use this Winged Greathorn for its secret Ash of War debuff that creates a large zone to increase the damage enemies take by 15% for 60 seconds. Well, in actuality, the biggest problem with this build is that you cannot increase the damage over time that Black Flame deals. If you didn't know, the Black Flame damage over time is known as SP effect in the game's code. Its damage is a set percent plus a flat value that can't be modified. Black Flame's base fire damage and direct hits of your melee attacks can be increased by these buffs, but the damage over time is where a majority of Black Flame's damage comes from, and that is the part that cannot be buffed by anything. Honestly, this build was very strong against the fire giant solely because Black Flame deals percent max HP damage. So the more HP the target has, the more damage Black Flame will do over time. Because of that factor, I finished the fire giant in a little under 5 minutes. And I rate it a solid 6 out of 10 in its current state because I think Black Flame is amazing and I love Black Flame. But the build it was in was just spread too thinly in places that it didn't need to be. So this is how I would optimize it a bit better. Getting rid of most of the buffs and tossing out the Jellyfish Shield and losing the Winged Greathorn, since it costs a lot of extra points to use these and they don't benefit Black Flame's damage over time. We can keep some buffs like the Howl of Shibriri, though I personally don't like this spell because you take an extra 30% increased damage and only deal 25% more damage instead, but I guess it's okay as long as you have Golden Vow to offset the defensive debuff. So let's keep that and Golden Vow and now add Black Flame's protection. But just remember that you can't use Howl of Shibriri and Black Flame's protection at the same time because they are both body buffs and they'll replace each other when used, so just remember to only use one at a time. Also, I had to reallocate my new attributes because I had to have 29 int just to use Law of Casualty for some reason, which is a huge waste of points and a spell slot. I can take these points and add them to my Mind and Faith for more mana and higher damage, as well as access to every other Black Flame spell, and turn this into a true Godslayer Black Flame build. Be sure to change out the Erdtree seal for the Godslayer seal to buff Black Flame incantations. On top of that, I can swap out the Dragon Great Shield Talisman and Fire Scorpion Talisman for more useful talisman like the Great Jar Arsenal Talisman and Radagon Icon to better suit this build and make the Black Flame spell casting faster. This build is now twice as strong and is 37 levels lower than what I had to have to meet all the build requirements from the original build. I tried the fight again at my lower level of 135 and defeated the Fire Giant almost twice as fast, just under 3 minutes. There are so many different ways you can optimize any build in Elden Ring. Having more levels is not always better, and it's funny how strong any build can be when optimized just a bit more. This is the Vampire build and was sent in by the user on your screen. Again, reference the sheet as it contains everything they require me to use for their build. It's a pretty simple build that revolves around restoring your own health as much as possible. Unfortunately, they also did not provide us stats for this build, So once again, I am forced to only meet the minimum requirements to use everything they included in this build. Starting as the hero class, put 60 points into health as our standard, 65 strength for more damage output, 17 int for some reason to use our golden order seal, not sure why they specified to use this, and 30 faith to meet all our spells minimum requirements, with the leftover points being put into mine to make this build exactly 150. This build includes around 7 unique methods of HP restoration, 2 from the hands and feet of the Royal Remains set, 1 from the Blessed Dude Talisman, 1 from the Icon Shield, and 1 from our spell Blessing Boon, as they specified to use any heal over time, but we only have 30 faith to work with. Then we also have a 6th instant heal from the Great Stars passive, and an additional 7th Giga bonus heal from the Ash of War Prayerful Strike. This viewer also allowed us to summon the Mimic tier so that we can keep each other alive with double the total healing, and allows our Deathbed Dress to heal our Mimic and have the Mimic's Deathbed Dress also heal ourselves. This build has a lot of healing, but to a fault. It lacks any sort of meaningful damage output and also lacks proper defense. Granted, you don't really need any defense when you restore so much HP that the only thing that can kill you is a one-shot, but anyways, I found myself very healthy for a majority of the Fire Giant fight. So the biggest issue with this build is its viability all comes from the Ash of War, which is very slow and easily interrupted. I cannot tell you how many times my Prayerful Strike got cancelled by the Fire Giant's attacks or just straight up missed. Especially in his second phase where he rolls around a lot more, I can only imagine how much worse this factor would be on other bosses. The animation being so painstakingly slow screwed me over a lot more, but the healing did feel very nice as I rarely felt the need to drink my red flasks even when I got punished. I also dislike the Mimic tier because it feels like I have to babysit it to really get the full value from it, but it actually healed for a ton of health at one point. It just wasn't very meaningful to the success of this fight besides that. Using this build, I defeated the Fire Giant in around 5.5 minutes on my first try, which felt very slow. I give this build a light 4 out of 10. There's a lot I would change. First off, we're gonna really focus on min-maxing the Prayerful Strike Ash of War, as that's the best part of this build and we can crank it up a lot. I swapped this build from the initial hero class to the Vagabond class, and we are now exactly level 131, and trust me, that's important. Our new stat lineup will be 68 vigor and 11 mind exactly, which I'll explain in a bit. 28 endurance to not fat roll with all our gear equipped, 65 strength, and then no points in anything else. My new talisman will be the Crimson Amber Medallion +2, Urge Free Favor +2 Bull Goat Talisman to get a total of 101 poise exactly, and the Carrion Filigreed Crest because we have 82 FP at 11 mind, and the Prayerful Strike normally costs 20 FP to use, but with this talisman it now becomes 15 per use, so we can actually use it 6 times because if you have at least 5 FP left over, your Ash of War will still be used just like normal. So we get an extra use out of our Ash of War without having to invest more points into a higher mind stat, and then just take mostly blue flasks because you won't need to use red flasks unless you're in a pinch. The biggest issue with PS is that the cast time is really long before the actual attack can deal damage and heal you. It's normally very easy for it to get interrupted. We're gonna max out our poise as much as we can to ensure nothing will interrupt us. However, Elden Ring has a Miyazaki moment where there's a lot of random PvE enemy attacks that can just stun you even if you have over 100 poise, not just the Fire Giant. So we won't be using anything like the Iron Jar Aromatic because even that won't stop some boss attacks. However, with exactly 101 poise, we can ensure that everything else that is not an undefined, always staggering enemy attack will be unable to cancel your Prayerful Strike, so you can cast it without being interrupted as much as physically possible. There are a lot of ways to do this, but I use the Banished Knight Helm, Radon's chest armor, and the Tree Sentinel's hands and feet. This creates a pretty cool rusted gold aesthetic, like you're a blood-soaked paladin who heals by hurting others. Most importantly, Prayerful Strike restores 30% of your maximum HP. Prayerful Strike does not heal you based on the damage you deal with it, so even if you deal 1 damage, the more HP you have, the more you heal for, obviously. With exactly 68 vigor, Crimson Amber Medallion +2, Urge Free Favor +2, Morgoth's Great Rune active, and both the Crimson Spill Crystal tier to boost our max HP even further, and the Crimson Burst Crystal tier to regen HP over time. With everything active, our HP comes out to over 3,000. And with this HP, I healed for 939 when using Prayerful Strike. This Ash of War healing is now stronger than a fully upgraded plus 12 Crimson Flask, since your flask caps out at a max of 810 HP restored without using the talisman that makes it heal more. This allows us to get insane value from our Prayerful Strike Ash of War. Using this modified version of the build, I defeated the Fire Giant more than a full minute faster than the previous attempt. And now this healing feels so much more rewarding. This is the Minecraft Steve build and was sent in by the user on your screen. And when I say sent in, I mean more like smeared across my comment section like a bloodstained message in a zombie apocalypse. This viewer left 18 individual comments relating to their build, most of which were incomprehensible, but I did my best to decipher their build and put everything into the build sheet as best as I could. This particular comment is honestly what inspired this video, because this was like a one-time special thing, as it was so ridiculous that no one has ever seemed this enthusiastic about sharing a build with me, to the point where he left dozens of comments hoping I would notice him. So I had to give him the benefit of the doubt and let him cook. All of the requirements for this build are on your screen, and it's a beautifully simplistic build that does one thing very well, and that one thing is to smash. This viewer didn't give me the skill point attributes for this build, so starting as the hero class, I just put 60 into vigor, 25 for endurance soft cap, and 80 strength to get my damage as high as possible for the pickaxe's A tier strength scaling, and then just 25 faith for golden vow because they specified to use that. It's literally a pure strength build with not much else to it. The pickaxe normally has some very slow heavy attacks and even slower charged heavies, but the viewer told me to equip Braggart's Roar Ash of War to it, which not only adds plus 10 physical attack buff, but also gives plus 10% to all damage negation types, and even increased stamina recovery speed at a flat rate of plus 10 per second, and all of this lasts for 60 seconds. Also, when Braggart's Roar is active, it changes the moveset of the two-handed heavy and two-handed charged attacks of the weapon it's put on. Heavy attacks are noticeably faster now, and the charge attack comes with a wind-up and a running start that can cover a lot of distance pretty fast, and it deals an absurd amount of damage. The Roar Medallion also increases the damage of your new charge attacks while under the effects of Braggart's Roar by an additional 10%. This stacks even further with the Axe Talisman and the Spike Crack tier to make your charge attacks deal over 5,000 damage in a single hit to the Fire Giant. The running start charge attack takes a bit to get used to and isn't the best for more mobile bosses, as I noticed I was missing a lot more in the Fire Giant's second phase when he moves around more. Regardless, this build allowed me to take down the Fire Giant on my first go in a little over 3.5 minutes. I'm giving it a solid 8 out of 10 because I'm honestly just surprised at the raw damage output that this build has, and it's really just funny because this guy had left so many comments that made this build seem so much more complex than it actually was, because it turned out to be extremely simple, and honestly, I'm just glad I let them cook. This build is actually amazing on its own, but we can easily add some more depth to it without changing our stats at all, including a much needed makeover to horrifically attempt to make our character look like Minecraft Steve, since we're using the pickaxe of course, and then instantly getting rid of the Blue Dancer Talisman because the damage it's giving me is literally worthless. Swap that out for the Claw Talisman to increase jump attack damage, and put on the Raptor's Black Feathers to increase our jump attacks even further. The running charge attack with Braggart's Roar is very strong, but not ideal to require 3 to 5 business days before it actually lands, so it's nice to have another option for when we can't use that and still allow high damage output with our jumping attacks. Change our basic finger seal to the Claw Mark seal again, as we have a ton of strength for it to scale off of. Switch out our physics flask to have the stamina regen green spill tier because this build eats stamina. And lastly, equip mostly every bestial incantation, as these spells all have a lower requirement for our 25 faith for golden vow, which are just free spells to give us more versatility. With this setup, I defeated the Fire Giant in just barely over the 2-minute mark. I genuinely don't think I've ever killed the Fire Giant this fast with a non-special build setup, and had a lot of fun using this build. This just proves to me that no matter how annoying YouTube comments can get, they're always worth looking through to come across genuine supporters like this viewer's build, which for me was my favorite one to use in this video. This is the Sisyphus build and was sent in by the user on your screen. Finally, someone gives me the proper stats and attributes to use with their build. I'll be copying this identically now. Starting as the Prisoner class, this build prioritizes the use of strength with a dip into the intelligence stat and a whole lot of endurance. Main weapon being the Ruin's Greatsword, which gets an S tier scaling in strength at max level, and the Meteorite Staff, which can't be upgraded but has high scaling by default. They also gave us a handful of sorceries to use, which vary from gravity spells to Carrion Slicer and even stealth sorceries, which don't actually work on bosses. Immediately, I noticed just how underwhelming gravity spells are for PvE in Elden Ring. They lack range and don't seem to make up for it in damage either. Most of the gravity spells feel like I could just use anything else for more damage. The build isn't bad, gravity spells just kinda suck in general, and from what I can tell are best used in PvP, which is what I think this viewer prefers it in. It's sad because I love the concept of gravity magic in Elden Ring, but it's just very impractical with long cast times that can easily be interrupted and just damage overall. With low intelligence, the Rock Sling became the best spell that the viewer allowed me to have, but even then it wasn't that strong. It took me a little under 4.5 minutes to defeat the Fire Giant, which steadily picked up the pace the moment I stopped using anything except the Ruin's Greatsword and its Ash of War. Sadly, I have to give this build a decent 5 out of 10 as a result of nothing besides the Ruined Greatsword being actually useful in this build for boss killing. Unfortunately, I think the best way to adjust this build is to go a complete 180 with the gravity concept. I changed a lot and honestly just ditched the Ruin's Greatsword and stuck with the Falling Star Beast job because it has a really powerful Ash of War with a way faster cast time. It's a lot harder to miss and can be chain cast from a decent distance. Not only is the Ash of War really strong, but the weapon actually hits pretty hard too and staggered the Fire Giant before his second phase. This new theme I'm going for is more like an anti-mage with the full Knights Cavalry set plus the skeletal mask to fit the vibe. Our new stats reflect our new weapon and has 45 strength and 45 dex for a standard quality style build, which is best for the Falling Star Beast Jaw, which does not actually scale that well with intelligence. We took away a lot of points from the old endurance stat to give us more mind and HP, and lastly we had 20 int just for the weapon's minimum requirement. We kept the meteorite staff, but all of the other equipment like our talisman were swapped out for the Great Jar Arsenal, Erdtree's Favor +2, Shard of Alexander, and the Crimson Amber Medallion to make us pretty tanky. Our spells consist of any sorceries we can equip for 20 or less intelligence, so Terra Magicus to buff our Ash of War, Rock Sling for stagger help, Great Glintstone Shard for some range options, and the Carrion Slicer if we ever needed to get a quick hit in. With this updated anti-mage version of the gravity build, I defeated the Fire Giant in almost exactly 3 minutes, a whole minute and a half faster than the previous gravity build, and personally something I could see myself completing an entire playthrough with after its makeover. Here's to hoping they add more cool gravity related weapons in the future Elden Ring DLC. This is the Sonic build and was sent in by the user on your screen. Lastly, we have this final build utilizing the Keen Urumi full Bull Goats armor set and the Lightning Ram Ash of War. Pretty simple build, and finally another viewer has provided the stats for their build so I can follow it identically. Starting as the Wretch class, this build really only uses Vigor, Endurance, and Dex. That's it. Everything else is pretty much at its default value. They only required 3 talisman for this build, which are the Bull Goat, Lightning Scorpion, and Shard of Alexander, and they said I could choose whatever I want for the last one. So at first I chose Millicent's Prosthesis, just for a little bit of extra damage since it stacks on the Lightning Ram Ash of War, but quickly learned how fast this build eats through stamina and changed it to the Turtle Talisman mid-fight. Somehow I was talented enough to fuck up a 3 talisman build requirement and only realized at the time of editing that I had the wrong Scorpion talisman equipped the whole time. I was using the Faith Scorpion like a dumbass and not the Lightning Scorpion, which was a pretty big mess up on my end because they look so damn similar, and I just didn't read. Now, I defeated the Fire Giant on every other build in my first attempt except this one, and honestly that was completely my fault and just a skill issue and not because of the build. I didn't have that Lightning Talisman equipped like I said for the extra Ash of War lightning damage and got the Fire Giant to literally 1 HP, where I was then one-shot through full Bull Goat's armor, which was kind of shocking until I realized that it was only because of the Scorpion Talisman regardless. So not only did I get the Scorpion Talisman wrong, it ended up killing me anyways. But again, that was completely my fault. If I had the lightning one, I probably would have killed him already, and especially on this last hit. Had I killed him there, it would have been a little bit under 4.5 minutes. But once I knew how to effectively use this build, the second time only took me 3.5 minutes and was a walk in the park. But unfortunately, totaling almost 8 minutes exactly for me to defeat the Fire Giant with this build. The Lightning Ram actually surprised me with how much damage it was able to put out, even though it can be hard to land successfully for multiple uses of its Ash of War as it's easily interrupted or avoided. However, the Urumi is actually very strong regardless. It felt like if I couldn't use the Ash of War, I could at least always use the Urumi itself, and its charge heavy attack covers a massive range for its hitbox and deals an equally impressive amount of damage. Overall, the build was genuinely fun and satisfying, but had some major problems with stamina regeneration, which aren't fixed with just a Turtle Talisman. As it stands, I'm giving it a light 7 out of 10, as the damage genuinely surprised me quite a bit, but I do acknowledge that it could be very hard to use against faster moving bosses. The biggest fault to this build is how slow the stamina regeneration is while maxing out endurance after Lightning Ram eats it all away. So to adjust this build, I'll remove a little endurance just to give us a bit more mind, as our Lightning Ram FP cost does add up over time. Our new talisman set will be the Shard of Alexander, Great Jar Arsenal, Bullgoat Talisman, and the Green Turtle Talisman, of course. But in our physics, I'll be including both the Green Spill tier and Green Burst Crystal tier in the physics to boost your max stamina and increase the regen as much as you can, which actually stacks with the Turtle Shield and stacks even further with the Green Turtle Talisman, which are very necessary for this build to work. I'm unsure if the Pickled Turtleneck consumable stacks on top of the crystal tiers, but the Green Burst tier restores 15 stamina per second for 3 minutes, and the Turtleneck is only 10 stamina per second for 60 seconds. So if I had to pick one or the other, it would always be the Green Burst tier. With this setup, you gain an additional 26 stamina recovery rate on top of your base stamina recovery, which is 45 per second, for a new total of 71 stamina regen per second. You could use the Flame Grant Me Strength spell for an additional 5 stamina recovery rate, but this is more than enough, which is evident by me obliterating the Fire Giant in under 2.5 minutes with the Giga Stamina Recovery bonuses. Overall, very fun gimmick build when you don't have to worry about stamina. Thank you to everyone who submitted these builds for me to review. I had a lot of fun seeing how my audience approaches build making, as it's been the main focus on my channel and what allowed me to gain over 100,000 subscribers in the first place. You guys picked up a lot of really interesting things and even taught me a few surprises along the way. So man, I'm just really proud of you guys. Even the builds that didn't perform too well still inspired me to find ways to fix them and make them viable. This video reignited my passion for build making, so I really hope you guys enjoyed it. And maybe it's the autism, but I love explaining how and why builds work certain ways, because anyone can make a good build, and any good build can always be optimized just a bit further, including my own, as even I always have more to learn. I hope you all enjoyed watching, as this is sort of a new content format I'm testing out for 2024 to start off strong. But be sure to leave me your builds in the comment section, and please don't forget to include stats and starting classes, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.